The silent witness. I stood in that courthouse hallway holding a piece of paper that legally declared I was never worth fighting for. My husband had just taken everything. The house. The cars. The investments. 12 years of marriage, reduced to nothing. His lawyer was shaking his hand. His mistress was smiling by the exit. And I was holding that divorce decree with shaking hands, thinking one simple thought. You have absolutely no idea what you've just started. Pause. Let that land. What you're about to hear will change how you think about patience. About strategy. About what happens when you underestimate someone because they're quiet. Hit that subscribe button. Because this story doesn't end the way anyone expected. Character introduction. 30 seconds to 2 minutes. My name is Carol. Or it used to be Carol Reynolds. Now it's Carol Winters again, my maiden name, the name I was born with. But that name is important. That name is the entire story. 12 years. That's how long I was married to Mason Reynolds. 12 years of believing in something. Believing in him. Believing in the life we built together. I gave him everything, not just financially, but emotionally. I left my career. I became what he needed me to be. I became Mrs. Mason Reynolds. And on an ordinary Tuesday morning, while he showered, his phone buzzed. The first message said, "I miss you." The second said, "Last night was incredible." The third one, the one that changed everything, said, "I can't wait until you finally leave her." In that moment, standing in my bathroom looking at my own reflection, I made a choice that would take 3 years to unfold. 3 years of patience. 3 years of strategy. 3 years of being someone Mason Reynolds didn't even recognize, even though I was standing right in front of him every single day. Rising tension. The discovery. That day, I didn't fall apart. I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. Instead, I did something much more powerful. I became someone else. The messages were from Cindy Marshall, his assistant. A woman I'd met at company parties. A woman I'd smiled at and made small talk with. And now a woman who was sending my husband messages that left no doubt about what was happening. But here's what Mason didn't know. I'm not the woman who begs. I'm not the woman who makes it easy for someone to position her as the crazy wife. I'm not the woman who falls apart. I'm the kind of woman who gets strategic. That very day, I walked into a lawyer's office. Not the lawyer who would eventually represent me in the divorce, but a different one. A man named Jackson Foster who specialized in something very specific, asset protection. I told him everything. The messages. The affair. My suspicions about what was coming. And then I asked him the question that changed everything. How do I protect myself in ways Mason would never see coming? Jackson listened carefully, took notes, and then he asked me, "What is your legal name right now?" "Carol Reynolds," I said. "I took Mason's name when we married." "Change it back," he said simply. "Change it back to Carol Winters. Do it quietly. Do it without telling him. And you can do something that's completely legal, completely defensible, but that he will never expect." The strategy unfolds. I changed my name back the following week. Filed the paperwork. Published the notice in a newspaper I knew Mason would never read. And legally, officially, I became Carol Winters again. But at home? At home, I was still Carol Reynolds. I was still sleeping in the same bed as my husband. Still playing the role of wife. Still acting like I didn't know anything was wrong. But everywhere else, in a legal capacity that Mason didn't even know existed, I became a completely different person. I rented a post office box under Carol Winters. I opened bank accounts at institutions where Mason didn't bank. Accounts that existed completely outside his awareness. And I started moving money. Not large amounts that would trigger suspicion, small amounts. Careful amounts. $500 here. $300 there. Transfers that looked like ordinary expenses. Grocery money that went into savings. Cash back from credit cards that went into investments. Gift money from my parents that Mason assumed I spent, but that I actually saved. Over 3 years, These small, strategic transfers accumulated into something substantial. Something invisible. Something that would eventually matter more than anything in that courthouse. But the money was just the beginning. The documentation. The real power came from the recordings. I bought a small device, voice-activated, able to record for hours, and I kept it in my purse. And I recorded everything. Every conversation where Mason discussed his plans with Cindy. Every argument where he revealed his true feelings about me. Every phone call I overheard between him and his lawyer before he filed. Every moment where he showed me exactly who he was when he thought I wasn't paying attention. And the recordings revealed something I hadn't fully understood just from reading text messages. They revealed the depth of his contempt. He talked about me with casual cruelty. Called me boring. Called me naive. Said I had no idea what was coming. Said it was going to be so easy to minimize my settlement because I didn't understand business. Didn't understand finance. Didn't understand that marriage was ultimately an economic contract that favored the person who contributed financially. I also recorded conversations with his business partner, Albert Chen. Conversations that revealed something even darker. Mason had been moving marital assets into business accounts. He'd been disguising personal expenses as business expenses. He was doing exactly what the law says you cannot do, hiding marital property. And I documented every single transfer. Every payment. Every dollar that should have been disclosed in our divorce but that Mason was planning to conceal. I created spreadsheets. Tracked every number. Organized everything with the attention to detail that comes from knowing that if you're going to accuse someone of fraud, you better have documentation that's bulletproof. The waiting game. Over the next 3 years, something hardened in me. I also started working. Quiet freelance consulting work for small businesses. Nothing that would show up on our joint tax returns. Just cash payments, small projects that brought in $500 to $1,000 per month that Mason never knew about. Because he'd stopped asking about my days. He'd stopped seeing me as a person with agency and started seeing me as furniture. Something that existed in his house but didn't require his attention. And that's when I realized something crucial. Being dismissed is a superpower if you know how to use it. Jackson Foster had advised me, don't confront him. Don't show him the messages. Don't have the fight that brings everything into the open. Because confrontation gives people time to hide things. Time to prepare. Time to build their own strategy. But if he doesn't know you're documenting, if he doesn't know you're building a case, if he thinks you're just a quiet housewife who doesn't understand business, then you have an advantage that's worth more than the satisfaction of confrontation. So I waited. I watched the marriage deteriorate. Watched Mason stop coming home for dinner. Watched him stop pretending to care. Watched Cindy become more brazen, calling the house, texting when I was in the room, pushing him to file. And I recorded all of it. The turning point. 2.5 years after I found those first messages, Mason sat me down. He told me he wasn't happy. Said he'd never been happy for a long time. Said he needed space to figure out his life. And I listened to the script he'd probably rehearsed with Cindy. Probably practiced in front of mirrors. The one he'd convinced himself was kind. I nodded. I said I understood. I said we should handle this maturely. And Mason looked relieved. Looked grateful. Looked like he couldn't believe how easy this was going to be. Inside, I was thinking, you have absolutely no idea what you just started. So here's what I want you to understand before we go to part 2. Divorce isn't just about splitting assets. It's about one person's version of reality winning over another person's truth. And in my case, Mason's reality was that I was a housewife who contributed nothing. Who deserved nothing. Who should be grateful for scraps. The judge agreed. Signed the papers. Gave Mason everything. And I stood there silent. Accepting. Playing the role of defeated wife so convincingly that even my own lawyer looked at me with pity. But I want you to hear this loud and clear. I was not defeated. I was patient. And there is a significant difference between those two things. Screen fades to black. The courtroom deception. We discovered how Carol Reynolds became Carol Winters. How she secretly built accounts, gathered recordings, and documented everything while pretending to be a helpless housewife. Mason filed for divorce thinking he was walking away with everything. But he had no idea what was waiting for him. The legal strategy. When Mason's lawyer, Anderson Wright, arrived on the scene, he was expensive. Aggressive. Exactly the kind of attorney designed to crush someone he'd already dismissed. And he built his case methodically. He painted me as a housewife who'd contributed nothing financially, who'd had no career, who'd chosen to stay home and therefore deserved minimal support, minimal assets, minimal anything. I sat in my lawyer Janet Pierce's office listening to Anderson's arguments, and I nodded, looked worried, acted like someone who'd just realized she was going to lose everything. Inside I was thinking something very different. Let him build his case. Let him present his evidence. Let him believe he's already won. Because the longer he underestimates me, the more devastating the reversal will be. The discovery phase. The trap. The discovery process was brutal. Anderson demanded everything. Financial records. Bank statements. Tax returns. Credit card statements. Investment details. Every document that showed our life together. Every dollar we'd earned, spent, saved, invested during 12 years of marriage. And I provided it all. Every document he asked for under Carol Reynolds. Every record of every account held under my married name. I was meticulous. Organized. Provided everything within the required time frames. Made sure there was no legal basis for them to claim I was being uncooperative or hiding anything. And Anderson and Mason looked at it all and saw exactly what they expected to see. A woman with no income. No separate investments. No resources. A woman who'd been financially dependent throughout the marriage. A woman who would walk away with whatever the judge decided to give her out of pity rather than legal obligation. What they didn't see was what they couldn't see. What never appeared in any discovery document was Carol Winters. The accounts. The trusts. The investments. The property. The 3 years of careful, strategic building that had been created under a name they didn't think to search for. Under an identity that legally existed. That I had every right to use. That had been created through proper legal channels. And I had never once lied about it. I had just never volunteered the information. Because Mason had stopped asking me questions about my life years ago. The depositions. Poker face. The depositions were the hardest part. Sitting across from Anderson Wright while he asked me questions designed to make me look stupid. To make me look like I had no understanding of finances. No ability to manage money. No contribution to the marital estate. And I answered carefully. Truthfully. Yes, I stayed home for most of the marriage. Yes, Mason managed our investments. Yes, I didn't have my own career. And I watched Anderson smile. Watched him check boxes on his legal pad. Watched him think he was building an unbeatable case. I never once mentioned Carol Winters. Never once revealed that I had a separate identity. Never once gave any indication that the woman sitting across from him was anything other than the dependent housewife he believed me to be. But here's the thing about playing a role so convincingly. You have to believe it in the moment. You have to feel it. You have to let the other person's certainty feed your performance. And Anderson Wright was very, very certain. The trial. The illusion. The trial was short. Efficient. Almost anticlimactic. Anderson presented his case. Showed that I had no income during the marriage. No career. No financial contributions. Argued that I should receive minimal spousal support for a limited time. Maybe 2 years. Maybe $3,000 a month. Argued that Mason should keep the house because he paid for it. The cars because he paid for them. The investments because he earned them. And Judge Harrison Cole, a man in his 60s with traditional views about marriage and finances, seemed to agree. Seemed to think that yes, this woman had contributed nothing tangible. Nothing that could be measured in dollars. And therefore deserved nothing beyond basic support. My lawyer Janet presented our case. argued that I'd contributed in non-financial ways, that I'd supported Mason's career, that I deserved a more equitable distribution. But her heart wasn't in it. I could tell she believed we were going to lose. Believed Anderson had built a stronger case. Believed that Judge Cole wasn't going to see unpaid domestic labor as equivalent to paid work. And she was right. He didn't. The verdict, the performance. The judge gave me the minimal settlement, the minimal support, the minimal recognition. And I signed the papers. I walked out of that courthouse in my 10-year-old sedan, the only thing I drove away with, and I played the role of defeated woman so convincingly that even Janet looked at me with pity. With something like apology. With a sense that she had failed me. And no one knew. No one suspected that I was walking out of that courthouse with absolute certainty that everything had gone exactly according to plan. Mason needed to win this round. Needed to believe it was over. Needed to relax into his victory. Because when I came back, when I revealed what I actually had, the reversal would be complete. Would be devastating. Would be something he could not recover from. The year of patience. The year that followed was strange. Disorienting. I moved into a small apartment. Lived on the minimal support payments. Acted to friends and family like I was struggling. Adjusting. Trying to figure out how to rebuild. And everyone felt sorry for me. Brought me casseroles. Offered to set me up on dates. Treated me like someone whose life had fallen apart. And I accepted their sympathy. Their help. Their pity. Because it supported the narrative that everyone believed. The narrative that Carol Reynolds had been left with nothing. Had been abandoned. Had been defeated. In reality, in the financial reality that existed under Carol Winters, I was fine. I was more than fine. I had $340,000 in liquid assets. I had a rental property generating income. I had investments growing steadily. I had more financial security than Mason probably realized existed. And most importantly, I had recordings. Hundreds of hours of recordings that documented everything he'd done. Everything he'd said. Every lie he'd told. The preparation for round 2. Mason married Cindy 6 months after our divorce was finalized. Small ceremony. Just family and close friends. I heard about it from mutual acquaintances who told me with sympathy in their voices. Who expected me to be devastated. Broken. The tragic figure of the divorced woman who lost everything. And I played that role perfectly. Said it was hard. Said I was working on moving forward. Said I wished them well even though it hurt. And everyone nodded and felt sorry for me. And never suspected that I was fine. Was better than fine. Was building something they couldn't see. 1 year after the divorce. 1 year of Mason living in our old house with Cindy. 1 year of him believing he'd won completely. I was ready. The motion, the reversal begins. I filed a motion to reopen financial discovery. Claimed I had reason to believe Mason had hidden assets during the divorce. Had not fully disclosed his financial position. Had committed fraud in the process of dissolving our marriage. And I requested a full forensic audit of his finances during the marriage and the divorce proceedings. Mason's new lawyer, a woman named Beatrice Hall, called my lawyer Janet, who I'd kept on retainer for exactly this purpose. Beatrice said this was harassment. Said the divorce was final. Said I needed to move on. And Janet said calmly, "My client has evidence. Substantial evidence. That Mr. Reynolds concealed assets and income during the divorce proceedings. And we are prepared to present that evidence to the court. If the court agrees that fraud occurred, the entire divorce decree can be set aside, and we start over." Pause. I would suggest your client take this seriously. Screen fades. The final reckoning. The forensic audit. The forensic auditor assigned to the case was named Michael Torres. 30 years of experience finding hidden assets. This man had cracked open financial secrets that other investigators had missed. I sat in his office and gave him everything. Every recording. Every document. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered over 3 years. And I watched his expression change as he listened. As he read, as he understood the scope of what I had, Mason had been hiding money, had been moving assets into accounts under his business partner Albert's name, had been undervaluing investments, had been doing exactly what the recordings showed he planned to do: minimize my settlement by concealing the true extent of our marital assets. Michael documented all of it, created a report that was devastating, clear, undeniable, and he submitted it to the court. The hearing, the confrontation. The hearing was scheduled 6 weeks after the audit report was filed, and I sat across from Mason for the first time in over a year, and I watched him look at me with confusion, with anger, with the beginning of fear, because he still didn't understand how I had this information, how I'd built this case, how the woman he dismissed as simple and defeated had somehow gathered evidence that his own lawyers had missed. Judge Sandra Mitchell, a different judge this time, a woman with eyes that didn't miss anything, asked me to present my case. And I did. I presented the recordings, played excerpts where Mason detailed his plan to hide assets, where he discussed undervaluing the house, where he told Cindy that I would never know what hit me, where he laughed about how easy it was to manipulate someone who trusted you. And the courtroom went very quiet. Mason's face went pale. Beatrice looked like someone had just handed her a case she could not win. Judge Mitchell's expression was cold, hard, the expression of someone who doesn't tolerate being lied to, being used, being made complicit in fraud. The confrontation, Mason's moment. "Mr. Reynolds," Judge Mitchell said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "did you conceal assets during your divorce proceedings?" Mason looked at Beatrice. Beatrice whispered something, and Mason said, "I exercised my right to protect my business interests." "That," Judge Mitchell said coldly, "is not what I asked." She leaned forward slightly. "Did you deliberately hide assets, undervalue properties, or otherwise commit fraud in the disclosure of your financial position during divorce proceedings?" Long pause. And then Mason said, "I may have been conservative in some valuations." "Conservative," Judge Mitchell repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "Or fraudulent." The verdict: complete reversal. The forensic auditor's evidence was damning. The recordings were devastating. And the fraud was undeniable. Judge Mitchell set aside the original divorce decree, ordered a complete redistribution of assets based on the actual financial position, not the hidden one. And the numbers were staggering. The house, $1.2 million. The business, valued at substantially more than Mason had claimed. Hidden investments, accounts I'd never known about, but that the auditor had found. All of it was split. Fairly this time. Equitably this time. Honestly this time. I walked away with $890,000 in assets. Spousal support of $4,500 per month for 7 years. Plus attorney fees. Plus sanctions against Mason for perjury and fraud. And something even more valuable, the knowledge that the quiet woman he dismissed as beneath understanding had dismantled his entire strategy. The aftermath. The real victory. Mason and Cindy's marriage fell apart 2 years later. Not because of the financial judgment, though that certainly didn't help, but because the man Cindy had married, the successful businessman, the financial strategist, the man she thought was so clever, had been reduced to someone exposed. Someone who'd been outmaneuvered by the wife he'd considered beneath him. The scandal affected his business. Clients left. Partners distanced themselves. The confidence that had carried him through the affair, through the deception, through the trial, evaporated when he realized he'd been playing chess against a master while thinking he was playing checkers. And me. I took the settlement. Added it to what I'd built as Carol Winters. And I became someone completely different. Not Carol Reynolds. Not the version of Carol Winters who was hiding. But just Carol. Simply Carol. With financial security. With power. With the deep, unshakable knowledge that patience and strategy will always defeat arrogance and contempt. The deeper truth. But here's what I want to tell you, because this story is about more than money. It's about something much deeper. When Mason looked at me, he didn't see a person. He saw a supporting character in his own story. He saw someone convenient, useful, invisible. And that invisibility became my greatest power. Because while he was busy being loud, being bold, being unfaithful with casual confidence, I was watching, learning, documenting, building. I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because I was listening. I wasn't accepting defeat because I had no options. I was accepting it because I understood something Mason never did. True victory is not won in the moment. It's won in the patience. It's won in the strategy. It's won in the willingness to wait for the perfect moment to show your hand. The life lesson. So what's the real lesson here? It's not about revenge. It's not about winning. It's about something deeper. It's about understanding that in this world, there are two kinds of power. The power people see, the loud power, the aggressive power, the power that announces itself. And the power they don't see, the quiet power, the patient power, the power that builds in silence. Mason had the first kind. I had the second kind. And the second kind always wins in the end. Here's what I learned through this entire experience. Never underestimate someone because they're quiet. Never assume that patience means weakness. Never believe that someone who smiles and accepts defeat is actually defeated. The people who change things. The people who win. The people who build something real and lasting. They're rarely the loudest in the room. They're the ones paying attention while everyone else is busy talking. They're the ones taking notes while everyone else is busy celebrating. They're the ones building while everyone else is busy enjoying the moment. Patience is not passivity. Acceptance is not weakness. Silence can be the most powerful voice in the room. If you're in a situation where you feel powerless, where you feel dismissed, where you feel like the world has written you off as someone who doesn't matter, don't accept that narrative. Start building. Start documenting. Start gathering your evidence. Start becoming someone the world didn't know existed. Because quiet people often have the last word. And when that word finally comes, it's usually devastating to everyone who underestimated them. This story is Carol's. But it's also every person's who's ever been dismissed. Who's ever been underestimated. Who's ever been told they didn't matter. You matter. Your patience matters. Your strategy matters. Your quiet strength matters more than you know. If this story resonated with you, if you felt something shift in how you think about power and patience and strategy, please do 3 things. First, subscribe. Because we have more stories like this. Stories about people who refused to be written off. Who refused to accept the narrative everyone else had written for them. Who built something extraordinary in the silence. Second, comment below. Tell us your story. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever built something in silence? Have you ever had your own quiet victory that nobody saw coming? We want to hear from you. Third, share this. Send it to someone who needs to hear that their patience isn't weakness. That their silence isn't acceptance of defeat. That the quiet power they're building right now is going to matter more than they know. The end of Carol's story isn't about victory over Mason. It's about the woman she became in the process of building something no one could take from her. It's about understanding that the most powerful people in the world aren't always the ones making the most noise. Sometimes, they're the ones who are quiet. Watching. Waiting. Building. And when they finally reveal what they've created, the world has no choice but to acknowledge their power. Thank you for watching all 3 parts of this story. Your presence here, your attention, your willingness to stay and listen, that's what makes stories like this matter. We'll see you in the next one.